Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. We're continuing with Divorcing Xianity, the manuscript I'm writing. I've written 3 new chapters. The one right after Common Sense, where we left off last time in part 3, is where I'll begin. I've titled this chapter Narcissistic Abuse. This is something I've just learned of. If it helps you in some way or applies to you, then I ask you to look into it. There's lots of great videos on narcissistic abuse. This focuses primarily on the church, but also, real life stuff. We'll get into it here. I realize now that I suffered narcissistic... Let's start over. I realize now that I suffered ritualistic abuse in the church at the hands of narcissistic preachers and God himself. What I would have once called blasphemy, I can now say with no fear of retribution, that God is a complete narcissist. Hear me out. Now, I didn't understand terms like that until I looked into it around 2022. That's when I realized that I had been in a series of narcissistic relationships. We're not naming any names. It's no wonder, because I grew up in the narcissism of American Christianity. The abuse is real. You can look it up. Victims that suffer in such environments typically feel taken for granted, used, mistreated, criticized, and made to feel unworthy. I was told from an early age that I was not worthy of God's forgiveness. I understood that it took the death of an innocent human being, i.e. Jesus, to make good for all that I had done wrong. I mean, I was marked with this stain of original sin, right? I was never going to be worthy of God's grace, not without an atoning sacrifice. That theology lies at the heart of what people call, quote-unquote, Catholic guilt. I also understood that this God figure had an insatiable appetite for worship, even through my own personal suffering. I was told to praise God even through the worst periods of my life, and that if he didn't bring me out of those dark times, well, then there must be something wrong with me. I was not good enough. Sorry, there are bugs out here. These are traits of the narcissistic abuser, or narcissist abuser, rather. They lift you up and pedestalize you one minute and tear you down and discard you the next. They keep you in this constant state of wondering what you did wrong or right, just like my relationship with Father God. I realized after a breakup in 2022 that I have a tendency towards these types of women, i.e. relationships. What psychology would term female covert narcissist. It's a pattern I recognized once I learned the term for it. I was used to the ritualistic abuse at the hands of narcissists. That's why I say it's no wonder Christianity had prepared me to accept those toxic relationships. I had never been taught to set boundaries. As YouTuber Christy Burke points out on her channel, when God even knows all of your private thoughts, where are the boundaries with him? Well, you're not allowed to have boundaries with God. He's all-knowing and all-seeing. Talk about your total control freak. Likewise, I never set boundaries with the church. I let them use and abuse me because I had a talent, and I wanted to use it for God. As I've said earlier, this abuse went on for about 18 years before I said, enough. I finally decided that my time was valuable and too worthy to be wasting for free at a church that didn't really appreciate it. I set the ultimate boundary and left. Psychologists will tell you the only true escape from a narcissistic relationship is a clean break, with no contact and no communication. You have to remove the narc supply from the abuser so that it wasn't there providing my... Sorry, the last line of this chapter. So that if I wasn't there providing my services, then the abuse stopped. I was free. Next chapter. How can you mend a broken heart? Question mark. In the 1970s, the Bee Gees had a hit song. It was a cover song titled, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? I had this song on a 45, and it's a relevant question after you've suffered heartbreak. And even those escaping a narcissist do suffer heartbreak. I really loved God in the same way that I had loved those women. And it took a period of time to find healing and to mend. Getting out was only the first step. It took a number of years before I learned how to love myself and see myself as worthy and deserving. That happened during the summer of 2012 on Fort Myers Beach, where I'm speaking to you today. When I read the book by Dr. Germer, the first thing I did was I began speaking to myself more kindly and with love. That led to a practice of self-enrichment and self-affirmation that continues to this day. It's why I say that I learned to love myself during that period of time. You will never learn to love yourself apart from God inside of Christian theology, or, dare I say, brainwashing. You will also never learn to love yourself inside a toxic relationship with a human narcissist, which I discussed in the last chapter, God being the ultimate narcissist, capital U, capital N. Cults use fear, intimidation, and tearing down to brainwash its adherents. I see American evangelical Christianity as such a cult. If I had not escaped and broken free of their tactics, then I would have never found myself or learned to love myself. But the first step is getting out and breaking free. And for women, I do believe it's worse. Religion is the original patriarchy. The Pauline Gospels and the very nature of the hierarchy place men at the top. In evangelical Christianity, women are told to know their place, to submit to their husbands, to remain silent in church, and so on. The misogyny which that promotes must be unbearable for some women. It adds an extra layer to the abuse they suffer inside the church. If you find yourself inside the cult of American Christianity, I would dare you to ask yourself the question, are you worthy? Aside from the atoning sacrifice of Christ, do you really feel worthy of love? Do you in fact love yourself? Or have you been conditioned to feel unworthy and unjust? Do you look down on yourself because of your sinful nature? If you're one of the 20%ers who do all of the heavy lifting in your church, you may feel used and abused like I did. If you've poured your all into your faith and given yourself wholeheartedly to God, but you feel no better about yourself, it might be time to ask those hard questions. It might be time to recognize the toxicity of your relationship and to break free. That's what I did, and that's where healing began. I can honestly say there is a way to mend your broken heart. Last chapter I'll read today is titled Getting Out. So why didn't I get out sooner? To be honest, I liked the praise and adulation I received from those in authority over me, including my parents, church leaders, my elders, and even my peers. I said earlier that nowhere else that I received the unconditional acceptance and affirmation from my parents as I did while I was a leader inside the church. They held me up to my siblings as the gold standard. I was married with 2 children, I had a good job and a nice house, and I was revered and respected in Christian circles. That made my parents so proud. But it was all a facade. I don't think they realized that until my 2000 suicide attempt. I don't think anybody realized it but me. Also, I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I always tried to do the right thing. In this case, that giving all of me freely to the work of God. I just didn't realize at the time that I wasn't really doing the work of God. I was just feeding into the ministry. I was just giving away all my gifts and talents as an offering, just like one might put $20 in the offering plate. I didn't value my time until I realized how much I was missing out with my daughters on Sundays. I didn't realize my relationship with God was toxic. Not even after my suicide attempt. I just saw that as another personal failure. It was another way that I fell short of God's grace and mercy. But I certainly felt it in the year following. I felt His hand on my life when my first daughter fell into my lap months after buying my first home. I felt His grace and mercy all over my life in 2001. I added another layer to the self-sacrifice as I felt led to write a book about it. The working title was A Man of Praise. It was based upon my knowledge of being a worshiper and leading worship in church. I saw that as the pinnacle of my life up until that point. I felt like I had been blessed with the house and the child as a result of my unending worship of God. It seemed like my devotion to him had finally paid off, and I was gonna tell the world about it. The written word is just another one of my gifts that I was willing to give away for free to the church. I mean, had I published the book, I might have made a meager profit, but it wasn't about that. It was about evangelism and promoting my faith journey to the world. And if I'm honest with myself, it was a bit egotistical. I didn't even really question things until problems arose again in my marriage after my second adoption in the mid-2000s. The manuscript was written, and I even received a foreword from a beloved retired pastor, but by 2005, I was no longer feeling it. I was looking outside of evangelical Christianity for answers, and also looking outside my marriage. As I discussed in the chapter titled, Deconstructing It All, that was the beginning of my undoing. All right, folks, that's 3 chapters that I've just recently put together. I will expand on them, I'm sure, in the near future, but that's where it's at right now, part of my manuscript, Divorcing Xianity. This is part 4. Check out the 3 parts that I've posted previously in the weeks prior, since the week after Thanksgiving. I do plan to publish this work. You'll be able to download it on Amazon within a few weeks, I believe, once I've finished and edited the manuscript, and then I have to create a cover for it. But it will be Divorcing Xianity, at least at this time. That's what the title is, by Christopher Doyle. That's me. Thank you for supporting this channel. Give me a thumbs up and a like. Subscribe to it if you care to see my content. It's all over the place. I'm very random. It's just my life in a nutshell: sports, spirituality, life, fatherhood, all those things that are important to me. Again, thanks for watching. Come down and see us on Fort Myers Beach. We really need all the business we can get down here to help us recover. Aside from that, peace out.